Welcome to 28storms.com on this Tuesday evening, August 23rd. This is an update on Hurricane Irene, which seems to be poised to become the first major hurricane of the season within the next 6 to 12 hours. But first off, these are the most recent stats on Hurricane Irene from the Hurricane Center as of the 8 p.m. advisory. Irene temporarily weakened down to 90 miles per hour. It was moving off toward the west-northwest at 9 miles per hour, and the official forecast still continued to ramp this up very quickly into a major hurricane over the eastern half of the Bahamas. And notice how compared to yesterday, the track has continued to shift a little bit more toward the east. The landfall, or at least the first landfall, is directly over the Outer Banks of North Carolina near Cape Hatteras. But look out here along the mid-Atlantic and northeast states as the 5-day track does take this in the general direction of the Delmarva Peninsula. This is a quick look at some of the more recent tropical model plots, and now we have a very strong consensus of models taking this over or very close to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, including Cape Hatteras. And at this point, I really do not foresee a scenario that would take the big impacts away from the eastern half of the Carolina coast. I really don't see how you can avoid a major hurricane impact now. So interests need to really begin considering evacuation plans, especially once again over the Outer Banks, and in the meantime take all of the necessary precautions, as it does look like a major hurricane will be passing directly over or very close to you. Now for interest toward the extreme lower portion of the Carolina coast, or the North Carolina coast near Wilmington, despite none of the models taking the system directly over your location, and even as far south as Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you still need to be paying very close attention to the system. Over the last 3+ days, we've seen continuous model shifts toward the east, but sometimes they can overdo this shift a little bit, and then they start trending back toward the west just a little. Now, there's really no indication of that about to occur just yet. I'm just saying that it is a possibility that we cannot rule out at this time. And even as it is, that model consensus really is not that far away from your location. And in 2010, the primary model bias during that hurricane season was that the models were notoriously recurving systems too far to the east too quickly. So Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're not completely off the hook just yet, and interests in the eastern half of North Carolina need to be preparing now for major hurricane impacts. And the same can be said for many coastal residents from Virginia northward all the way to Maine and the Canadian Maritimes. You need to be ready for this, as there are now several models taking this a little bit more toward the north, even if it were to recurve just to the east of North Carolina. So with all that being said, now this is the most recent look at Hurricane Irene, and as we can see, especially within the last few frames of the satellite infrared, we have a well-defined eye beginning to develop here just to the southeast of the Bahamas, and this is a very problematic look for much of the islands down there, as it looks like Irene may be about to go or undergo a period of rapid intensification, and I would not at all be surprised if this develops into a Category 3 or possibly even borderline Category 4 within the next 24 hours. Sea surface temperatures along the southwest Atlantic and Bahamas are more than favorable enough for rapid intensification, and the latest water vapor imagery shows a very well defined upper level ridge located directly over the tropical cyclone. We have incredible poleward outflow channel extending several hundred miles away from the inner core of Hurricane Irene, and this extends even into the central Caribbean. So this system appears to have a green light for rapid development over the next 1 to 2 days. Now, this is the 48-hour 18Z GFS forecast of the 500 millibar steering pattern, and our tropical cyclone is expected to be along the northern half of the Bahamas. And notice that there is a trough bypassing the system over the northeast. Now, this trough is not quite enough to steer our system away from the United States, but it will be strong enough to weaken the western periphery of the subtropical Atlantic ridge, and that is one of the main reasons why we are expecting more of a turn from the west-northwest motion that is occurring now to a more northwest and possibly even north to northeast track. But as we advance this from day 2 into the day 3 time frame, so now this is looking at midday Friday, that initial trough is beginning to lift out now over the Canadian Maritimes, and there's going to be about a 24-hour window for this western Atlantic ridge to at least attempt to begin building back toward the west. And just how much that ridge begins to shift is really anyone's guess, but we do have a third and reinforcing trough that will be soon entering the picture. In fact, you begin to see it as soon as 84 hours, once again coming out of southeast Canada. And as we go into the day 6 or excuse me, day 4 time frame, this is now looking at midday Saturday. This trough is expected to begin to deepen just in enough time to possibly exclude some portions of lower North Carolina from receiving a direct hit, but unfortunately this run does not show the trough deepening quite enough for it to completely avoid the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But once again, this is a great example as to just how much timing is very critical, and this could significantly alter the forecast if any one of these parameters on the map are any slower or faster than is being currently projected by the forecast guidance. And finally, this is the latest 48-hour forecast from the European model. Much like the GFS, we have the first trough that is going to bypass the tropical cyclone. As we can see by day 3, it's already lifting out. So the ridge will have a very small and brief window to at least try to build back closer to the east coast. And again, we will have to closely monitor in future model runs just how much this ridge does try to make a comeback. And then, of course, by day 4, we have that reinforcing trough coming out of the Great Lakes and southeast Canada, and this is supposed to be the last and final trough that finally pushes this storm due northward, and by this point it successfully breaks through the ridge. But notice how between day 4 and day 5 the model still has this system coming in a bit more toward the west than the model consensus does. And in fact, if you look at this on some of the premium websites, and if you look at some of the smaller time intervals, this is still indicating a landfall a bit closer to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is toward the lower half of the Carolina or North Carolina coastline. So once again, you are not completely out of the picture down there between Myrtle Beach and Wilmington. Still keep an eye on this system, and we'll just see how things look tomorrow. But once again, by day 5 and day 6, much like all of the other models, we now have significant impacts being forecast all the way from the Virginia coast all the way through Maine and Atlantic Canada. So please continue to stick with 28storms.com throughout the duration of this event. We will continue to post updates on YouTube, Facebook, and our main page. Once again, 28storms.com during the overnight hours and into tomorrow. So thanks again, and all interests along the East Coast, especially from North Carolina northward, are advised to begin their preparations now.